Hello again, my name is Anne Marie Zanzel, and welcome to Coming Out and Beyond LGBTQIA plus stories. I am an ordained minister, bereavement counselor, conversationalist, spiritual wanderer, later in life lesbian, change maker, blogger, author, mom of four beautiful children, wife to my lovely wife, Tonda McKay, a northerner living in the South and trying to figure it all out. I share the stories of people who are coming out later in life to the LGBTQIA plus community and other queer stories. These stories are compelling, heartbreaking, joyful, and inspirational. I started this podcast because we need to normalize exploration of sexuality and gender at all ages. Plus, visibility is vital to the queer community. It's never too late to be who we are created to be. My guest proved that. Today, I'm very excited to have with me two wonderful women who do a lot of work in our community, Ash France and Dawna Noble. They are a couple, and I would love to tell you about them. Ash is a somatic practitioner who works one-on-one with queer women who are coming out later in life and are longing to create secure relationships as they identify and heal unhealthy relationship patterns. Ash is originally from Oklahoma and recently got engaged to Dawna Noble after moving to Oregon last year. Dawna Noble is an LGBTQ plus relationship specialist that is trained in a psychobiological approach to couples therapy and currently works with queer couples, showing them how to build secure and lasting relationships in her queer couples mastery program. Dawn and Ash are the hosts of the podcast Queer Couples Conversations, where she and her fiancé Dawna talk all things queer relationships and how to build one that can last. Queer Couple Conversations drops today. I think it's June 26th. So please listen, follow, rate, and review. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Hi, ladies. It's nice to have you here today. Welcome.
Hi, Anne-Marie.
Yeah, thank you. You know, when you give somebody a speech impediment and have them say queer race relationship, that is very challenging. I can't do the double R thing at all.
Yeah. We'll have to think about that.
So, it is so nice to have you here. The three of us met on social media. We saw what each other was doing basically on Instagram, and that's how we got connected with each other. Dawna reached out to me, probably a year and a half ago, and this is the first time we've ever actually done something together, so I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you the question that I ask all my guests, and one of you can choose. Tell me your story.
Yeah.
So I want you to tell me your story as individuals first, and then we'll get the couple part.
Yeah. This is Dawna. I just for your listeners.
Yeah.
I was raised Mormon. I'm one of 13 kids. Raised in a very conservative home. I'm number 4 at the top. And yeah, my journey has been through leaving the church was a process at 17. I knew I was gay from the first feeling of attraction. I think I was around 6 or 7. And just kind of keeping this secret to myself, for decades. Ended up leaving Mormonism. That was kind of a coming out in itself, of leaving the church in the process of relationships and finding another community where I belonged. And so that kept me kind of to myself, almost closeted even longer. And I ended up joining a non-denominational Christian community. I became a worship leader at a Bible school for the next 10 years, where I led mission trips to all over Africa. Along the whole way, so in love with my best friends. I mean, we know the stories, but really holding the line throughout the whole thing. I ended up coming out at 30 after going through a major loss of one of my closest friends, who died, trusting that God would save her, unfortunately. And just going through something really hard, it made me assess my life in a really sobering way that I couldn't continue to move past. I'd secretly watch the L Word and then ask God to forgive me, but ended up, I had my first sexual encounter with a woman at 17 as a senior in high school, and it opened my whole world. I knew that's what I wanted to do, but it was a secret. And then, leaving Mormonism, joining this Christian church, I devoted myself to God and to just, accepting that I would just love a man, marry a man, and not love him, but I could do it if I respected him enough. So for the next 10 years, nothing with a woman, no conversation about it other than to confess, to me the feelings, but ended up, coming out at 30, and just telling everybody, like, there's no other option for me. This is what I'm doing. I was very clear. I wasn't asking permission anymore. I knew it would come with a cost. I didn't realize how much it would cost me, how many friendships it would cost me. Ended up meeting a girl on Tinder. We met and got married within the year, and ultimately ended up in a pretty terrible, unexpected divorce, which we'll get into, around that piece. But that's kind of like that outline. I got into my primary training was actually in women's healthcare as a midwife. I did that for almost 10 years and then became obsessed with psychology, human behavior, attachment, and specifically around relationships. And I've been doing that full time for the last 5 years.
Can I ask you, did you do a mission trip and all that? Did you do mission work when you
I
were
did.
As a Mormon?
Not as a Mormon. Okay. Yeah, but as a Christian, I did. Yeah, lots of mission trips.
And what is your relationship with your family today?
It is better than it's ever been.
Good.
And it's been a process for sure. It's every relationship is being repaired, in this time, but everybody wants a relationship, and we're learning how to do that amongst our differences, and with lots of boundaries. But yeah, it's really good, actually. It's really beautiful to see how it's developed over the years, but it's taken about 15, 20 years almost to get to this point.
So Ash, what about you? Tell us your
story. Yeah, how about me? Let's see. I am the oldest of 3. And my story isn't so much, steeped in religion, although I was raised Methodist, and very involved with the church as I was growing up. But mine was more so, I came out at 26, and it took that long for me because I was steeped in heteronormativity.
Right.
And so this belief that there was one way to be, one way to show up. And as the oldest child, I felt compelled to fulfill this role, to be that child that I knew my family wanted and expected me to be. And then there was also the sin aspect for me as a kid growing up. And, a lot of denial around the feelings that were coming up from my friends, and kind of my own internal self-punishment that happened anytime I had a thought or feeling about a friend.
So where do you think you got this? Was it, as you said, it wasn't really steeped in religion? Because what I talk about a lot with my clients is that, there's like all these seeds that get planted. And they're very, very small little seeds. Like
Yeah.
dad will call out a gay person on TV and say something negative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There will be a gay person on the block, and all the kids will make fun of it or of their house or them or something like
Yeah.
that. So what was it for you?
So there was a lot of that. I grew up in a really small town in Kansas. And so there was that. There was the homophobia that was present. But one of my most vivid early childhood memories was around when Ellen DeGeneres was coming out, Rosie O'Donnell. And I remember I was around like somewhere around third grade and fourth grade. And I was downstairs in the basement watching the TV, the news about Ellen coming out. And I looked up at my grandma who was next to me and I said, what's gay? And she just shook her head and she said, it's just too bad. It's too bad. And so I knew at that moment, right? I was already connecting the dots as a little kid, watching the TV, seeing what's happening, but asking for clarity. And then the response is knowing that it's bad, right? Like that is not what I want. Yeah, that's not what I want to be. And then as I was growing up, I was confused. I was in a small town and there was nobody, right? Nobody who was out in my small town. And the only representation for queer community or queer people that I had was the Ellens of the world, right? And so I would look at that and think, well, I don't look like Ellen, I don't present in that way, so I can't be gay, right? That was my belief as a kid, which again, I think speaks to why queer representation is so necessary and important, right? To see the variety of what queer can be. But so I spent much of my life avoiding even being with the thought of it. And where religion comes in or God comes in is my big fear was around even thinking about it, because I knew at that time in my life, God can read my thoughts. God knows what I'm thinking. And so I can't even consider this, right? So I dove into relationships with boys and as I got older and eventually got married. And I loved the man that I married. I cared for him. But I was also deeply questioning my sexuality at that time and truly believed that the thoughts, the urges would go away after I got married. That was going to be the thing that healed me. We'd have kids, we'd have this beautiful life, and it would be fine. About 6 months into our marriage, I met a woman who I worked with. I worked at a bank at the time, and we became friends. And over the course of the next year and a half, it became more than that. We became emotionally involved, and she eventually became my catalyst for why I felt like I needed to come out. It had to happen. And my husband at the time, he found out and asked me, what's going on? And I told him, and which was a heartbreaking experience to move through the whole of it. And he was pretty determined to make it work after that, even though I was at this space where I was saying, I'm gay. Like, this is who I am. This is where I'm headed. I want to explore more of this, which was really hard for him. And I was also continuing on with the relationship with my catalyst and the woman I was engaged in an affair with. And so it was particularly rough. I was losing community quickly within the church. I was still very involved with the church, multiple churches really at that point with the town that I was in, and losing friends, family, of course, questioning, do we know you? Although my immediate family was fairly supportive of me at that time. But yeah, so he and I eventually, after the divorce became finalized, I went no contact with him and continued on with the relationship with my catalyst. And eventually we got married.
Oh, wow.
And so we were together for a little over 7.5 years altogether, married for about a year.
You and the catalyst.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
and the catalyst. Yeah. And that's when Dawn comes into the picture. That's when our stories kind of collide.
What I hear with both of your stories, you each had a catalytic event.
Yeah.
You had a person, and I talk about this a lot, is that people have like a catalytic event. Like Ash, you had something, excuse me, Dawn, you had something happen with a friend of yours that sort of all of a sudden said, "Oh my goodness, I can't live my life this way." And like a lot of people, Ash, a lot of people meet somebody and they start to fall in love and stuff like that. And I also hear that same thing. A lot of husbands, when you're getting divorced, they're like, "Hey, we can stay." When you come out to them, they're like, "Hey, we can stay married," and it's like, no, can't.
Yeah.
Because then it becomes a mixed orientation marriage, which people do.
Yeah.
But it opens up a whole nother can of worms of like
Yes.
how to navigate that and all those things. So what your husband responded is pretty typical.
Yeah.
They want to save the marriage and they don't realize that that as gay women, we need to be, our emotional, physical, spiritual, and intellectual needs are met by another woman.
Yes.
Even they may be able to meet some of those needs, they're never going to be able to meet those needs.
No. Well, yeah. And for myself at that time, I knew it's also not fair to him either. I am not able to show up in this marriage, in this relationship in the way that he deserves. Right. Neither one of us could meet that need in each other. And so I knew it was clear what had to happen, as excruciating and heartbreaking as it was.
Yes. And and I think that's another thing, is that what you said is very true, is that people often, like, a lot of women are so guilt-ridden and guilt-stricken. And a lot of times, when we say something like, your husband deserves to be in a relationship with somebody that can meet their needs, a heterosexual woman. Sometimes people can do things for somebody else that they can't do for themselves.
Yes.
So a lot of times people hear that and they say, "Oh, that's right," and they had never thought about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
This is a really big piece that I keep finding, that I feel like a lot of us are raised to kind of fall in line and to not make a mess, just, to be, as a child, be quiet, don't be too loud. You don't share your stuff on Instagram or on social media. We want to keep the family's name good, all that stuff. But to me, to me, that's where we end up feeling so stuck, is because we would rather suffer and make sure everybody else is comfortable than to make a mess, to blow up our lives in a way to be able to get it. And I think that's what people need to start seeing, is that people are making these really uncomfortable decisions and going after what they want. But there's this thing about being selfish or hurting someone, and it isolates us. So where we can't make any decision, and we live a life where we're in this functional relationship, but not one of connection and intimacy in the way we know we could have.
Absolutely. And so you all met. How did you meet? And and let's talk about that. And yeah, how did you meet? And I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah. So, gosh, this is like August of 2020. So not long, we're a couple months into COVID at this point. My ex-wife and I, we were looking for more connection. We were so closed off to social connection at that point, and moving through some issues within the family. We had family who was not accepting, not affirming of our marriage. They didn't show up to the wedding. And so my ex-wife was really moving through some grief around that. Not really processing it. It was just very present.
Was she new to the whole being gay and everything?
No, she'd been out for a while.
Okay.
So anyway, we ended up finding this group online on Facebook. It was a Facebook group for married couples with unaccepting family, queer married couples with unaccepting family. And I thought, wow, this is incredible that this exists. And there was a lesbian couple that were, they were the admins. And so I thought, let's join this group. This is community. So we did that. And it was Dawn and Dawn's ex-wife who were the admins of the group. And so at some point, my ex-wife, she connected with Dawn's ex.
We'll call it, yours is L, and mine is H.
Yeah. So for me, Ash, my ex-wife, L, and for Dawn, her ex-wife, H.
Yeah.
Make it. Yeah, I know it can sound really confusing. But L and H, they kind of engaged in conversation in this group over a shared trauma that they could relate on. And anyway, H ended up looking for some sort of creative project she was wanting to do and wanted to brainstorm, asked for volunteers. I volunteered, me and my ex-wife. And so that's how the three of us connected initially. We hopped on Zoom. My ex-wife and I were the only ones who showed up, and Dawn wasn't there, which I thought was kind of odd, but also no big deal. These things happen. So anyway, the three of us started forming a friendship after that. And
on socials.
Yeah, on socials. And then we met up and did another Zoom call together. And yeah, it's very interesting because Dawn, throughout that time, as we were becoming friends, H just made it sound like Dawn's busy. Dawn doesn't like my friends usually. So that's why she's not showing up to these things. It kind of made Dawn out to be an unsocial person. Yeah. And just kind of like she's not an enjoyable person, which is very contrary to who you are. But anyway, yeah. And so we ended up going to, my ex-wife and I ended up going to St. Louis. We were living in Oklahoma City at the time. And then we went to St. Louis to visit H and also Dawn. And I don't know, you can chime in at any point if you want to share where you're at with this at this point.
Yeah, at the time, my wife at the time and I were working with couples. We were doing couples work. We had a podcast together, helping couples. And so that was our world. So we had kind of this, very clear agreement. So I think one conversation that a lot of us are having is, how do you have relationships with the same sex, with, and so we just had agreements around that, how we're going to handle that. And so I noticed this intensity around her phone in a way that she could be right in the room, but I couldn't access her. And she would just perseverate on this new relationship. And the quote that we kind of laugh about now, that we both were being told is like, Dawn, they're my best friends, but they're my best friend, And my wife at the time was really wanting community and very lonely. We had just moved to St. Louis, and and so when she found them, connected with them, it was like I was so excited for her. Like I was like, awesome! I can't wait to meet them. But then as the intensity picked up, I started noticing this. We're crossing some lines here. Something isn't quite right. And so there was just resistance from the beginning of the relationship. And she continued to communicate that it was the two of them that she was connecting with, not one specifically. So anyways, they ended up coming to St. Louis. We ended up all meeting for an evening. And then after that initial meeting, they were just there for the evening and then went back home. Things just got turned up. The
Ramped
heat
up.
Got turned up. And then within 2 weeks or so, well, I don't know the timeline, pretty soon, within a month,
yeah.
We both woke up on the same day. Ash and I, different states, woke up, and they both told us, we think we want a divorce. Both of us were
we had a friendship had been formed between myself and my ex-wife and H. But I had no clue this was going on in their marriage. And Dawn apparently had no clue what was happening. So It was wild. And the whole time, you know, as they're becoming, you know, the three of us would talk in a group message, group text, but then L and H had their own thread. And again, throughout, you know, after St.
So Dawn,
Louis,
you were not part of this, like the conversations or anything like that at that
I
point.
wasn't. Ash?
No, Dawn.
Oh, Dawn. Yeah, no, she wasn't. No.
No, it was her friendship that she had kind of isolated me in the way she communicated to me about me to them. And I didn't, it wasn't threatening until, you know, the intensity started picking up. But, and then at that point, as a couple, we had these agreements that she was breaking, consistently breaking. And so, I didn't want them to be a part of our life. It was just, but they ended up telling us on the same day, but it wasn't, hey, I have feelings for this other person and I just can't continue. It was, you know, that you're not the best partner, you know, we're not compatible, you know, that you know what we were both getting the same.
So it was quote unquote all your fault.
Yeah, they definitely, they put the blame on us or on, you know, past issues that we'd had all of a sudden that were too much, right? It's just too much. I can't deal with this anymore. I don't think I can stay in this. And throughout this time, as, you know, watching their friendship evolve, both of them would use, you know, she's my very best friend. And I mean, it was very intense. And anytime I would question, you know, the intensity of the relationship, where things were headed, I would be told, it's not what you think, you're crazy. She's just my very best friend. So we were both lied to consistently the whole time, even when we would check in on what was going on. And so there was gaslighting and manipulation happening throughout that period, which was very confusing.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So you guys are told you want to, you know, your partners want to get a divorce.
Yep.
And you really don't know each other because you were sort of, even though you sort of knew each other, you were still, Dawn, you were still kept at a distance at Ash and her former wife just because of the way it was set up. So when did you start talking and like?
Well, we had H, my wife at the time, had created this story. She had told me that Ash was a part of it, that it was the two of them,
like a throuple situation,
like something might be happening there. And so she was the enemy to me. There was no way I was gonna build a relationship. But anyways, we all ended up separating and going our own ways. I moved back to Oregon. Ash ended up getting her own place. And then, you know, for a couple months, we were under this impression that it was just because of we weren't compatible, right? And then I was under the impression that H was going to be developing a relationship with them. And I was so, like, that level of grief, you can't communicate. I would find myself in the grocery store holding a basket, knowing that I think I should be putting food in here, but I didn't know how to move. Like, I couldn't function. And so much grief. And so I ended up looking at her story on Instagram just to see if H was there with them. I had never looked before. And then because of that, for Ash, that kind of gave her permission in her world to reach out and check in on to like see how I was doing.
Yeah, I had been wanting to reach out to Dawn. And again, both of them worked throughout this period to distance Dawn and I so that we wouldn't communicate or connect. But I'd been wanting to talk to her. I had learned that they were moving through a divorce and a few weeks prior, and I wanted to reach out, but then I didn't want to meddle and throw myself into this whole situation. And anyway, so I saw her, that she had seen my story, and I felt like that was a green light to reach out and ask, how are you? I heard you're going through this divorce. I'm going through it too. I know what this is like. How are you doing? Which she was bamboozled, to say the least, because as far as she knew, I was in a throuple, and so with her ex-wife. And so that's when we started kind of like connecting these pieces, and she asked if she could call me, and we hopped on the phone for 5 hours.
I bet. I was going to say, how long was that first conversation?
Oh, we were on the phone, and so I think it was like 5 a.m. my time in Oklahoma.
Well, I can imagine both of you were stunned. Like,
yeah,
absolutely
it
stunned.
could not believe it. And I had, Dawn informed me of a conversation that H&L had before we went to St. Louis, where they were already saying, hey, there's something here between us, and we don't want to knock the dominoes down, which I had no clue about. But anyway, so yeah, it was shocking. And do you want to?
I want to just read the first message here that we sent to each other. Okay, I was believing that Ash was the enemy, and so it makes me laugh about this. But she wrote me and said, "Hey, Dawn, I noticed that you saw my story. How are you doing?" And I was like, "Why is she reaching out to me? Why?" I was very shocked in the moment. And so this is my response to the person that I don't like. "Hi there, Ash. Appreciate your kind question. I'm a little hesitant to answer and be vulnerable after everything. Would it be all right to ask why you're asking?" And she just went in to say, I just heard that you guys are getting divorced too. And I'm like, what? You're getting divorced?
Yeah. So
that just started this whole thing.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it also maybe taught a lesson of being willing to talk to someone and to listen to someone, because sometimes what we assume about them isn't true.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, and you realized, oh, wait a minute, I'm thinking all this stuff about Ash, and actually none of it's true. And
right.
So you were both of you were willing to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Ash was willing to be vulnerable and say, "Hey, Dawn, how you doing?"
Yeah.
And you were saying, "Okay, I don't know if I trust you, but I will see what's up."
Yeah.
And then when you heard that you were both getting divorced, you're like, "Okay, wait a minute, this isn't."
So we couldn't wrap our heads around what was going on.
Yeah.
Putting the pieces together was, there was so much relief in it that it made sense now.
So
and this is
why did you say there was relief?
Because it didn't make sense to me, the way that things happened and the way that I had experienced my wife at the time. It wasn't lining up.
Right.
There was something, and then it's crazy making and how things were going. So instead of it enraging me, I actually felt relief. Okay.
And it was the same for me too, that sense of relief. It felt like we gave each other the gift of truth and honesty that we had been longing for months at that time. We didn't connect until 2 months after the separation. And so, that whole period, we were under the belief that it's our fault why our exes left. And that even though I would, ask my ex-wife or, push the idea of there's got to be something happening here. And I was told, no, you're crazy. That's ridiculous.
Same.
And then so to get the truth that we thought that we had a hunch on, it felt like freedom.
Yeah.
I mean,
I like the way you said that. We offered each other truth.
We did. Yeah.
I love that. My ex was a mental health therapist, so she knew how to work people.
Yeah.
So,
unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so let me ask you a question, since you both work with couples now, and that's, and you're both passionate about that. When somebody comes to you and maybe they're single at this point and they say, "Oh, it's all my fault that this marriage broke up or this relationship broke up," what do you say to them?
Oh my goodness. We start with a lot of compassion. We start with compassion and holding that space for themselves, and that this is not your fault, right? You are discovering these things too, right? As you're coming out and learning these things about yourself. This may be as new to you as it is to them, right? Not always the case, but we have to hold compassion for ourselves for where we are right now to be able to move forward, and also take responsibility for the parts that are ours to own, right? I mean, there's a balance there. You don't need to sometimes we harm ourselves, right? Because we think that we need to beat ourselves up to feel better. When that's going to perpetuate the issue at hand.
So I know you both work with couples, and I know, Ash, you also really work with women coming out later in life too.
Yeah.
And Dawn, do you do the same thing? Like women coming out later in life who are navigating like sometimes their first queer relationship?
No, I solely work with couples. Ash just works with individuals.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we're
Right,
integrated.
You don't counsel people together then?
No.
No.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, we're separate in that sense.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So I've got a bunch of questions. So Dawn, what are some of the struggles you see with queer couples? What are some of the problems that people exhibit, and how do they try to solve them, and where is that failing?
I think a lot of ways, any type of relationship, any, gay, straight, queer, trans, it's across the board a universal thing that relationships can be difficult. But as far as like a queer couple goes, and a majority of them, they enter it in a way that they're isolated as a couple. They're not celebrated as much.
Absolutely.
And also because it's this like thing they've longed for so long. And some have, like us, we lost our community to have this. And it's hard to, like, it's a two-part thing where you're doing something for yourself, and then you also get a person along with it that you don't really know that well. But the process is sped up because you've wanted this for so long and you've lost everything to have it. And so you cling to it more. And it's intense. I mean, there's a reason why we all move in so quickly. That's not going away.
Well, and I also find too that, especially with the first queer relationship people have, that person is a tie to their own queer identity.
Yep.
Yes.
That's a great way to put that.
And if I lose that, like my wife and I, when we were first together, because I was thinking of, like, we struggled our first couple of years and stuff like that. And I remember thinking to myself, is that like, if I lose her, or if I break up with her because of all the stuff I was going through that had really nothing to do with her, but because I was getting divorced, all the things you mentioned, isolation, divorce, people being angry at me, all those things, I've done that all. That I remember thinking to myself, if I lose her, then like I know I'll be losing a piece of my queer identity. And at that point, I said, I can't do that. I've lost so much already. I don't want to lose that right now. And so it was really a conscious choice on my part. And we've talked about everything I'm saying here, she knows. So we've talked about this all. And it's a really important thing is that often that first queer relationship is so tied to who we are becoming.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that you spoke to that, Anne-Marie. That really resonates with me too in my own story.
Yeah. That's the one reason Ash and I have actually integrated our work together, and we're finding it to be much more effective because, it's like the chicken or the egg. I get so many people saying, should we start with individual work or couples work first? And so we've integrated where Ash is meeting with them individually and giving them these skills where they can regulate, where they can ask those radically hard questions. And then I'm working with them as a couple, and it's been really supportive in those aspects.
How wonderful! That's actually that's wonderful. That is.
It's been pretty incredible, like the work that we've been able to do there. I tell my clients that the depth of connection that we can have with others reflects the depth of connection that we have within ourselves. And so that's a big reason why this work is, I believe, so necessary. The individual work along with the couples work. Part of what Dawn does is she teaches couples how to become experts on one another. And so to become an expert on yourself, right? So we can help our partner to become an expert on us is just a huge step up. It's a leg up in trying to discover that. So it's beautiful work.
Yeah. And I can see that, getting people in touch with who they are
Yeah.
It is very effective in couples counseling because
Mm.
they're able to ask what they need and what they
Mhm.
want in
Mhm.
the relationship. And a lot of times couples just sort of, they have all the good bones, but they just sort of miss each other.
Yeah, yeah.
They just,
Yeah.
there's love there, but sometimes because of trauma, because of past relationships, and Tanda and I've talked about this a lot too, is that so my wife and I are both in our late 50s now. And she came up as a young lesbian because she didn't have the benefit of marriage, like a lot of lesbians her age. She's had probably like 5 serious relationships. And so one of the things which has been detrimental to the queer community is that when things aren't working out, you just say, okay, let's pack it in. While people who have the benefit of heteronormative life, when you're married to somebody, you're much more likely to put the effort in to repair the relationship, figure out what's going on, and sort of navigate all those changes. But when people have been in a life in which they haven't had the privilege of those things, they often don't know how to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, there's so many couples that break up prematurely that don't need to. And that's a big part of the work that I do is, right, you both are coming with a history and that's loaded, and we all have trauma, whether it's big T trauma or little t, but now that is going to be activated. The more committed you become, we think we're going to have more security, when really it activates us more. And those old wounds, those old attachment styles start flaring. And so showing couples how to co-regulate together. Where in my sessions, I actually have them face each other. So they don't miss cues. I teach them how to read their partner's body. Because if we don't learn to become an expert of what's going on in our partner's internal world, that's when we end up in fights. When we feel misunderstood and we end up taking care of ourselves and dropping our partner. So that's critical. I really believe if you want a quality relationship, not just to stay together, you have to learn how to care for your partner and yourself at the same time.
It's not easy, Anne Marie. I mean, this is the work that we do, and it's not easy, but it's so worth it. It's so worth it.
Yeah.
So tell me about your podcast.
We love it. We're so excited.
Yeah. And also, the first 3 episodes that are out right now, we're sharing that story of how Dawn and I came together in depth. So this is the abridged version that we shared here. But we're starting with how we came together. And we're really going to be talking all things queer relationships, whether that's queer sex or how to handle toxic relationships. That's where my work is largely done, is around toxic relationships, how to heal from them, recognize what it is if you're in one. But to also talk about co-regulation, if you have different trauma repair, if you have different attachment styles, right? How do you work with that? How do you move through unaffirming family, right? Set up what are boundaries? So a lot of that. And then we're also going to include mini sessions that Dawn will be leading there. And
so you're who is this?
Esther Perel.
Yeah.
Esther Perel.
You're gonna be the next one, Dawn.
That's the goal.
There we go.
The goal. You just hit the spot in my heart.
You lit her up, Anne Marie.
She is the picture on my phone.
Well, Esther Perel, what I love about her is that she's even in the beginning, first season, she had queer couples on it.
Yeah.
It's really nice. And I'll never forget the first one. It was a queer couple that I listened to. It was a lesbian couple, and one of them was the stay-at-home mom, and it was all it was all the same thing, that a heteronormative couple.
Yeah.
It was she wasn't feeling heard, she wasn't feeling seen, and it was oh my gosh, she was amazing. I really love listening to her. She's pretty cool, isn't she?
Yes, love her.
Yeah. So let me ask you a couple of questions to end our time here today.
Yeah.
So when you were coming out, did you have a coming out song?
Oh my goodness. I didn't necessarily have a coming out song, but I will say the first time I went to a queer club, a queer bar, I walked in and Pharrell, that song Happy was out. It had just come out. And I stood there on the dance floor watching all these beautiful, it's making me even emotional now thinking about it, but I watched all these beautiful queer people on the dance floor and fill this room, and the song Happy was playing. And I was just crying at a bar. Like, but it was the first time, you know, after I had come out, where I was surrounded by this community of people who I could identify with for the first time, like really felt seen. And so I don't know, I don't really have a coming out song, but Happy, that Pharrell song was,
That's
I don't know,
actually-
that stands out.
Well, that's a perfect song, right?
Yeah.
You're happy. You're finally making the moves you needed to do to be able to become who you are now.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And
Yeah.
how about you, Dawn?
I cannot remember. I don't think I didn't even have a phone when I came out. I didn't have a cell phone until I was 30. So I wasn't listening to really anything at the time. Yeah.
You know, I know oftentimes people who are in very conservative Christian cultures often have a very much alternative universe. I had some friends here this weekend, and the woman in that was raised independent Baptist. And so, you know, sort of like the Duggars, you know,
Yeah.
but not quite. And she's like in her early 40s now, and she was saying that like she misses like the cultural things. Like she has to ask people all the time. Like, and it was funny that we went to Pride together, and she drove me to Pride to the parade, and she had Michael Jackson on, and it was sort of funny because I was like, oh, this is old time stuff, you know.
That's
Oh, I
awesome.
love that.
Any books or movies that changed your life, that like really changed your perspective on things?
For me, for a period of time, I was really trying to reconcile my faith, and, you know, how can I be queer and be in relationship with God? I've since gone through deconstruction and not in that space anymore, but a book that really just shifted and altered my life at that time was Vicki Beeching's book, Undivided. Where she talks about her journey through Christianity and navigating her queer identity. And it brought me peace during a time that I was really struggling with who I was. And so, yeah, that book was...
It made you realize something was possible.
Yes, it opened up another door of possibility in my life. And so, yeah, that book was particularly moving for me.
Dawn, how about you?
Yeah, the book that stands out for me, it's actually a Christian-based book, but it's called The Irresistible Revolution by Shane Claiborne. That he was just a radical, you know.
I know who he is. I've seen him speak, actually.
He worked with Mother Teresa. He did these extraordinary things, and he went against what a lot of people were at the time doing. And it just like, that's how I want to live my life. Like I just was inspired by his ambition. And
in my evangelical Christian days, I saw him.
Yeah.
At a conference, and it was so funny because they had him, and then they had a bro pastor there that like it was like such a dichotomy.
Yeah.
A bro pastor who was talking about women as cars, and Shane Claiborne. It's like they
very contrast. Yeah. Rob Bell's a big one too. I don't know if you know of Rob Bell, but
I know Rob Bell.
He's been a big part of like deconstruction and coming out for, I think, both of us.
Yeah.
So what's the best part about your life today?
Oh my God, Anne-Marie.
That's a big question. I feel like so many parts. I love so many parts of my life. I love where I live. We're in Bend, Oregon. I love who I'm with.
Yeah.
Who I get to love. I love what we're both building with our careers and helping people. I mean, this has been my dream for years, is getting to work with people one-on-one like this and dig deep. And move into the spaces that I have moved through myself, right? Like, I love that.
We
Sorry.
often will look at each other and just like, we just stop what we're doing or just look at each other and like, can you believe this is our life? Like, this is the best. I mean, we made a mess along the way in different ways throughout our life.
Yeah.
Lost a lot, rebuilt, but this is I cannot imagine my life getting better. Honestly, I love every part about it. And we had to go through the absolute worst thing that we've ever experienced to access these parts of ourselves.
Well, that's the thing, is that I always say that a sunrise and a sunset look very different. And so sometimes look very similar. They look very, very similar. And sometimes what we think is the death of something is actually the birth pangs of something.
Yes.
And so, like, my wife talks about it because she was in a 15-year relationship before she was with me. And she says that, like, she never realized that, like, she would end up being so much happier in such a different place. It was the most painful. Her as well. It was one of the most painful things that she's ever been through. And so I guess that's the thing, is that, like, sometimes that when we think things are really bad, it's really just something new is forming, and we shouldn't be afraid. We live with so much fear.
Anne-Marie, it makes me think of this as I was moving through the separation with my ex-wife. I share this on the podcast, but I was sitting at the table with my mom at her house and my parents' house, and I was just sobbing so deep in my grief for what I was moving through and losing. And I just had this moment of clarity, and I paused and I said, for as awful as this pain is, I'm grateful for it, because I know that for as deep as this pain goes, as this grief goes, I know my joy can go just as high. It's a reflection of how high that joy can go. And I look back on that now and I'm like, I really see that and I really feel that, because I'm living a life that I can't believe I get to live.
And like, so, damn, I'm prophetic.
Right? I was like, what is going on with me?
I just love that so much.
So I encourage everybody to start listening to Queer Couples Conversations with these two very smart women as they guide us through queer couple conversation and how to get along better with our partners. So I'm very excited that you guys are putting this work out, and I can't wait to listen. I will be putting up how you can reach Dawn and Ash up in all the social media and all the usual places. And I want to thank you both for your time today. It was a great conversation. It was so nice to finally spend some time with you in person. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you, Anne-Marie. It feels like we've been just hanging out with a good friend here. So this has been really nice.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Bye. Bye.